Weird and Way Media.
Night, Mr. Walters.
You see that guy over there? Now, he's an actor. The guy on the phone, he's a prize fighter. Me, I'm a cab driver. I'm the only cab driver in this place.
Hello, everyone, again, and welcome to Night, Mr. Walters, a taxi podcast. I'm your co-host, HP, and with me, as always, is my other co-host, Father Malone. Father Malone, how are you doing this evening?
I'm well, and I'm going to say the same thing I say at the start of every show. I say, HP, shut up.
And we'll get into that as we discuss this episode. What episode, do you ask? First, let me remind you that we are doing these shows in broadcast order and not in order of filming. This week, we are covering episode 13, Full House for Christmas. This was written by Barry Kemp and directed by, of course, James Burrows. And this is an interesting episode, Father Malone, because this is a rarely seen episode. This isn't one that I can really recall seeing much when I was a kid watching the show in reruns or even after the fact.
Is this an actual lost episode, or you just didn't see it a lot?
No, I don't think this is a lost episode. Because I think if it were truly lost, I don't think you'd be able to find it at all. We'll get into the reasons why I think it was rarely screened, if you will, but certainly we can make the case that it's far more well known for what happened off screen than on screen. And I'm, of course, talking about, well, this is the infamous Tony Clifton episode. Father Malone, do you have any background on this particular moment in taxi history?
When Andy Kaufman signed on to play the role of Latka Gravis, one of the stipulations in his contract that he would have 2 guest appearances by another actor named Tony Clifton. We've talked about Tony Clifton in other episodes of the show. He's the lounge lizard, heavily prosthetic, wigged, and foul-mouthed, and ultimately terrible at everything comic alter ego of Andy Kaufman. So in this episode, this was supposed to be one of 2 episodes that Tony Clifton is supposed to appear in, and they wrote a really good script for him and gave him what a juicy role. Tony Clifton was going to be the brother of Louie De Palma. But, of course, when it got to filming time, Tony Clifton remained Tony Clifton to the end and was nothing if not a nightmare to all cast and all crew, and was causing all sorts of disturbances to the point where, and now I did listen to an interview with Judd Hirsch who described the rest of the encounter, where he had finally had enough and he just got up and physically dragged and threw Tony Clifton out of the soundstage, where he was taken away by security. Judd Hirsch said, while it was happening, as soon as he put his hands on Andy Kaufman as Tony Clifton was dragging him through the door, he realized that he was just another character in this scenario that Andy Kaufman had woven. Like, this is exactly what he wanted to happen. He needed to be tossed out off the set, and Judd Hirsch was now facilitating that unwittingly.
Yeah, the cast really found themselves falling into the Kaufman hole, as it were, and they were clearly the butt of the joke on this one. Another example of Kaufman's anti-comedy genius. There was some discussion beforehand. I think Ed Weinberger had primed the rest of the cast by saying, look, this guy's going to come in to do the show named Tony Clifton. He may look like Andy Kaufman, but he's not Andy Kaufman. I suspect he delivered this with more than a little bit of tongue-in-cheek. By that first rehearsal day, where Clifton arrived late, I think he had 2 heavily made-up ladies of the evening, as it were, one on each arm.
Call girls, or were they prostitutes?
We've got into this. I think these were probably not call girls, because I don't think they were wearing furs. And that, as you know, is a mark of the higher echelon. Tony Clifton was giving out these little yapping mechanical dogs to everybody. It just sounds like it was kind of a chaotic scene. Jeff Conaway just outright refused to go along with it, and he already stormed off the set. And things just went down from there, as you described. This was, of course, famously recreated in the Milos Forman movie, Man on the Moon, which featured many of the original Taxi cast members playing themselves. Curiously, Danny DeVito did not play himself, which was the biggest sticking point that I had with this part of the movie.
What made no sense is that Christopher Lloyd is in that garage and he's not in this episode because he's not in this part of this. He's not in this season.
You're absolutely right. There's reaction shots of quote unquote Christopher Lloyd reacting to all this chaos, but he wasn't even in this episode. Well spotted, Father Malone. Well spotted.
Randall Carver is in that movie, but we don't want to have Danny DeVito play Louie De Palma in here because he's already playing another character in the movie. That might confuse people.
That didn't work for me.
David Letterman wearing glasses? That's cool.
We could pick apart Man on the Moon, and we probably will someday. Back to Full House for Christmas. By late Wednesday, Tony Clifton was out, and Richard Ferrangi was brought in to play Nick. And we'll talk a little bit about Richard Ferrangi momentarily. We start out, it's a bizarre sort of peal of Christmas bells and a zoom in on a Christmas tree lit up at night. Another interesting directorial choice, don't you think?
Rockefeller Center, man. Christmas time. New York City. It looks great. What's interesting is, so we go from that B-roll shot. Oh, that establishes us perfectly. Here we are in New York. It's clearly Christmas time. Cut to outside the cab company in the middle of summer where people are walking around in short sleeves. Like, oh, okay. We didn't really see any snow in that first shot, so maybe it's just a balmy day here in New York. B-roll is usually solid on this show, and it's inconsistent and poor in this one.
We've established that it's the holiday season at the Sunshine Cab Company, and we cut to the garage, and the cabbies are all sitting around the poker table discussing their Christmas plans. And Elaine walks by, and Burns says very cheerfully, "Merry Christmas, Elaine," and she just keeps walking, doesn't acknowledge his season's greetings at all, which I found kind of funny.
And I wrote appropriate.
I knew you would. So she walks by over to Louie in the cage. Burns asks Alex, what's going on here? And Alex explains that Elaine's ex-husband picked up, now this is interesting, her ex-husband picked up, quote, the girls this morning, and this is the first Christmas that she's ever spent alone.
Well, what Alex doesn't understand is that one of those girls is a boy.
Yes.
Or he just likes to call them the girls because he's being rude, and he wants to go, oh no, I just thought they were both girls. I didn't know it was a boy and a girl.
I think we've already heard she has a son and a daughter, and yet Alex is describing them as the girls. So that immediately sent up my antenna a little bit. I said, well, okay, this is not the usual Taxi episode here.
You know what set up my antenna? The fact that that Nardo's take for the day of $35 was a bust. And in a previous episode, like a little over $200 was like the greatest thing in the goddamn world. What is the median here? What is expected of these cabbies? What does an 8-hour shift look like for Louie De Palma? Is he expecting $100 every single time?
$35 isn't bad. That's about a sixth of what the greatest haul ever is. So I don't know. You're right. I don't know why Louie is so offended by that amount. Louie gives her the business for only booking $35. And meanwhile, we're back to the poker table and Bobby responding to Alex saying that it's the first Christmas that Nardo is going to spend alone. Bobby laments that he'd go crazy if he spent Christmas alone. And Tony replies, but you are spending Christmas alone, to which Bobby bizarrely mimics a crazy person.
Crazy. Yeah, he's like a nut. It's a great line. It's a great Wheeler does it, man. It's a good line.
I had the opposite reaction of you. I said, this is not funny. This is just like sophomoric.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly Bobby Wheeler. I'm telling you, all of the worst traits of Bobby Wheeler that they keep hammering him home, and I'm now living for them. So go, Bobby, go.
I guess if you look at it from the perspective of that he's just a terrible person, for him to just sit there sophomorically going like this, I guess that's well in character. So maybe it's good writing in disguise. I don't know. I'll let the viewers decide. Somehow the cabbies all agree with Father Malone, and they think this is really, really funny. Alex walks over to get coffee. We see the business where Louie gives Nardo a hard time, and she storms away, and Louie asks, what's the matter? And Alex replies that Louie wouldn't understand that some people just feel sad at Christmas. Louie refutes this, saying that he's got feelings, and his mother is emotional too. She cries every Christmas on account of his little brother, Nicky, never coming to see her. Nicky is Louie's younger brother, who is apparently some kind of big shot, and he lives in Las Vegas. Louie's mother cries every Christmas because Nicky's never around for the holidays. And Louie offers Elaine the same sensitive advice that he gives his mother when she cries. And what is that advice, Father Malone?
Shut up. It's a delicate line reading. It's, shut up. It's a very comforting shut up.
As we get into this episode, and I'm not going to beat around the bush, I'm going to beat up on it a little bit. But
this is a great one. How dare you? It's so well crafted. Like the B plot. Tell us about the B plot, HB. We haven't really gotten into it yet.
Well, that's because there is no B plot, Father Malone. That's why I'm not discussing it, because it's all a plot, which is a problem. Louie goes on to further indicate that things are going to be different this year with his brother Nick. Nick is due in town any minute. Usually, as I said, he's in Vegas gambling, but this year he's coming out to Atlantic City to catch the action, and Louie convinced him to stop by for a few days. Now, Louie says that the last 6 years, his mother stayed up on Christmas Eve crying, which was really hard on him. Having to put her out in the hall and all of that is really hard on Louie, which is another great little Louie. That's sensitivity, Louie De Palma style. So at this point, we cue Nick barreling into Sunshine Cab, and he and Louie hug ferociously. As mentioned, Nick is played by Richard Farangi. Very familiar face. Anyone will recognize him as from everything from The Jerk, the Steve Martin movie. He was in Ghostbusters 2. He was in Repo Man, of course. I remember him best as Tony Darvo in Midnight Run.
What are you doing? What the fuck are you doing here? He's great at that. He's Pletchner in Repo Man. He's awesome in that. He's been in everything. He was in Carlito's Way, for God's sake.
He does what he does so well. He's that supporting actor who gives a little bit of spice and livens up whatever scene he's in. And he's fantastic. And he's great here, too. Oh,
and fans of MASH are going to recognize him instantly. He was sort of an antagonist character who kept popping up on that show. So shout out to you, Gretchen.
I have to say, if it's going to be a choice between Tony Clifton and Richard Farangi, he is much more believable, as you would expect, as Louie's brother. He even kind of looks like Danny DeVito a little bit, which is interesting.
I'd like to praise the costume designer on this show over and over again. I'll do so again here, in that they give Nicky this purple shirt that matches Louie's. It's just this subtle thing that kind of like ties them together, which I like.
They definitely do echo each other, although Nick has the much more flamboyant. He's got like the cashmere overcoat and a dark pinstripe suit. And
cashmere or camel hair? I was curious.
I'm watching this as a standard def broadcast, so it could be either, but it's definitely, you can tell there's value there. It's a really nice looking overcoat.
I like to think that Nick was going for the camel hair.
Yeah, probably. Maybe, something really, classy, as he'd probably say. In the midst of Louie's glee at seeing his brother, he wants to introduce Nick to, quote, some of his inferiors. So he takes Nick over to the poker game. Of course, Nick is like a shark in chum-strewn waters. He wants to join the game immediately. But Louie already has said to him, he already warned the rest of the cabbies that he's a pro. Louie has all of these excited plans to spend time with Nick and do all these things, but Nick only wants to sit in on the poker game. A few times he tells them, hey, deal me in or whatever. It gets to the point where Louie is getting a little upset now. It's been 6 years and all he wants is for Nick to see Ma. He asks Jeff to take a cab and drive Nick over to his mother's place.
So, I had a question about that, because he tells him to get a cab and get him over there. But does that mean that Jeff put him in a cab, or Jeff put him in a cab and then you yourself drive him? I
took that as Jeff drove him personally, because it seems to me that Louie thinks that Nick can't be trusted to go there on his own. So he's basically deputized Jeff to take Nick over there directly and deal with Louie's mother. What ends up transpiring even calls that into doubt, which we'll talk about momentarily. So they leave the garage. Sensitive Alex can't help notice to Louie that Nick was in no great rush to see their mother. Louie confides to Alex that Nick's attitude is worrying him a little bit. Now, there's a bit of actor business here that I had to bring up, and you're smiling, so maybe you've noticed this too, is while he's talking to Alex, Louie goes over to the coffee machine, dispenses a cup of coffee, and then he takes the coffee while he's doing all this dialogue and pours the coffee from the paper cup into the mug with the cursive L on it for Louie. Did you notice that?
My note says Louis puts vended coffee into his own mug. What a great bit of business.
It was fantastic. It's so grounded. You can imagine like the actor saying, well, if I was Louis and I had this coffee mug, this is exactly what I would do. And it's so effortless the way he's talking with Alex and having this conversation. And I don't know, it just worked beautifully. And I know some directors, they get a little upset because actors like to have bits of business, props that they can hold up, glasses they can take on and off, what have you. This I thought was awesome. This worked really well for me. I don't know. It excited me how well, because I didn't notice it the first 100 times I've seen the show. And now I noticed it and I said, this is great. This is fantastic.
I mean, it might be Burroughs, it might be the writing. Who knows? Whoever came up with it, maybe it was a collaboration of all of them. But yeah, like that's what's fantastic about this show is that there's constant little bits of good physical business going on, even when it doesn't matter, honestly, to the rest of what's occurring.
This moment in and of itself means nothing, right? It's just shoe leather to get you from one part of the scene to the next. My belief is all of these little moments add up over time and they create a grounded foundation for the audience to watch the show and really become immersed in that world. I know I'm overselling it a little bit, but I just thought it was fantastic.
Can we double back for a moment, HP?
Sure.
To the moment where everyone's going around the table and telling them what they're doing for Christmas. Because Burns tells us that he's going to Dorothy Hamilcutt's parents' house for Christmas. They're doing dinner. Her parents live in Florida.
We already found out that they were moving to Florida, Dorothy Hamilcutt's parents, so they could no longer pay for their apartment rent. And he was going to have to either quit forestry or she was going to have to quit becoming a nurse. Right. So there we have the second of plot holes, inconsistencies.
I have a new theory going here.
Yeah.
Dorothy Hamilcutt's in on it. There was no parents moving to Florida. It was just a plot to sucker Alex out of $2,500. And then at the end of this year, those two will move on to another city and do this again. They'll find another cab company, perhaps in Pensacola, Florida, or Raleigh, North Carolina.
To paraphrase the movie Independence Day, they're like locusts. They just go from location to location. They find the biggest suckers they can find, and they milk them out of however much money they feel they can do without getting caught out. And then they skip town and do the same thing in some other place.
Remember when they were waiting for Burns to come back from his shift so they could take him to the dog track? Remember, what money was he betting then? What money is he betting here in this episode? He never needed that money. He just wanted to break Alex. He knew $2,500 would do it. And Dorothy Hamilcutt was in on the fix.
And so the seduction of John Burns continues apace. What will happen next, dear listeners? Well, who knows? What evil lurks in the hearts of men? Only John Burns knows.
Not this goddamn kids choir yet. Have we discussed these kids yet? When did that happen? When?
No, I'm getting to that. That's coming up here. After the actor business with the coffee and everything, Louis confides to Alex that the winters are getting really hard on his mother. And it's his wish that Nick invite his mother to go and visit Nick in Las Vegas, where it's nice and warm and it takes some of the burden, frankly, off of Louis, because he's been holding the bag with his mother for the past 6 years. He rightfully feels like she deserves a break. She deserves to go out and live the high life in Vegas with his brother Nick. And just then, a children's choir comes in and starts singing carols to the cabbies and passing the hat around and accepting tips, which is kind of a heartwarming thing, what have you. The leader of the choir goes over to Louis and gives Louis his cut of the returns. And it's clear that Louis has worked out an arrangement with this children's choir. You have some thoughts on the children's choir, I can see.
I do. I'm curious how Louis De Palma came in contact with this child leader of a choir and arranged this thing. I think that's worth exploring. Perhaps some fan fiction is in order.
It is a little odd. And it seems like with every episode that centers around Louie, we find out a little bit more about his background. And now we're finding out about his mother and about his younger brother and their whole family dynamic. So I would like to find out how he, are you saying it's like Sherlock Holmes, the Baker Street Irregulars, where somehow they've reached an accord and they're kind of helping each other out? Is that what you're saying?
Saying Louis De Palma is the type of character who, if you were to suddenly wake up and find yourself in Bangkok with him, you wouldn't be too surprised to hear him suddenly speaking Thai.
The choir finishes up and we cut back over to Elaine. And of course, Elaine, who is, despite her holiday depression, not having her kids, let's call them her kids, not the girls, her kids, she decides to put a brave face on everything and says, why don't we have a Christmas party in the garage? Much the same way as she insisted that they make the garage into a wedding chapel for Latka's paper marriage from the episode of the same name.
I'm in a garage, like a professional garage, HP.
Not a taxi dispatch, but sure.
Yeah, I think we both have. When I was growing up, my dad was a mechanic. That they are stuffy and hot, gross. The floors are all slick, even after you clean it, it's still gonna be slick. And the smell of grease and burnt oil sounds like Christmas.
It's beginning to smell a lot like Christmas. But let's give credit. Elaine is being the eternal she's the positive to Reiger's negative, because she's just trying to make chicken salad out of you know what. She suggests they have a Christmas party, and during which she intimates that she got the other cabbies gifts, which clearly catches them all off guard. I think she says to them, well, hey, didn't you guys get gifts too? And I think Tony says, we will now, or something to that effect.
One of my favorite other character moments in the bit, like as soon as she says, oh, I can't wait till you see what I've got you. And everyone at once just like, oh, God damn, now we all have to buy gifts.
Yeah, they all kind of look at each other and almost roll their eyes like, oh, man, really? So that's kind of funny. Nick comes back to the garage. He hasn't been gone very long. He's eager for some poker action. He's imploring them, I want to get a seat at the table.
Now, this is why I think he told Jeff to just put him in a cab and get him there, because Jeff, I think Jeff would have made sure he stayed there. He wouldn't have hung around to get him back.
I would agree. That backs that assertion up, because then otherwise, like, did he walk back? Is Jeff still sitting there in the cab? I think, well, no, what could have happened was maybe Jeff dropped him off and said, well, just let me know when you want me to pick you up.
Or it could be that Jeff told the cabbie to take him there. The cabbie did. And then Nick said, keep the meter running. Went in, said, hi, Ma. She said, oh, blah, blah, blah. Had their exchange. You going to take me to Vegas? What are you kidding? No, I'm not taking you to Vegas. All right, bye, Ma. Merry Christmas. Got back in the cab. And that can't involve Jeff. And Jeff could not have said, I'll pick you up. Like, where would he have gone in that amount of time?
Yeah, I think the mystery is solved. I think that's the most likely sequence of events, given the fact that Nick doesn't want anything to do with hanging out with his mother. He just wants to get right back to the garage so he can start fleecing the cabbies for poker money. So he gets back to the garage and he's not been gone. It's been like 5 minutes. It's ridiculously quick. And this sets Louie off and he muscles Nick into the cage to hash it out. And during this argument that they're having, Louie's mother calls to complain. Louie learns that when she brought up the idea that she was going to visit him in Las Vegas, that Nick just laughed in her face. Just the ridiculousness to him of the suggestion that she could go and visit him in Las Vegas. At this point, Louie's imploring Nick to pick up some of the slack with his mother. He insists at this point that Nick take her to Vegas. He's not asking anymore. He's telling Nick that he has to take their mother to Vegas. Louie gives him an ultimatum. You take our mother to Vegas or you leave New York and we're no longer brothers. Unfortunately for Louie, Nick calls Louie's bluff and says, if that's how you want it, that's how it is. And he walks out. Louie is left promising his mother that she's going to go to Vegas. Somehow she's going to go to Vegas.
I have some thoughts in this scene, sir.
Go for it.
First of all, kudos James Burrows as always. They removed the cage from Louie's dispatch booth to get the cameras in there to shoot them inside. It felt intimate, like we were actually in there with them, and I really liked that.
Yeah.
Also, if I was with my brother and I had been taking care of my mother alone for 6 years, and I asked him to take her for a couple of weeks to Las Vegas, and he said, I'd rather not be brothers with you anymore, I don't know that I'd let him sit down and start gambling.
It's pathetic to me. That's pathetic. I mean, it's just a sad situation for Louie because he didn't want it to come to this. I think it's a mix of emotions for him. I think he missed his brother a lot. And the shock of his brother, as I said, calling his bluff, a straight thinking person would say, then you get the hell out of here. Get out of my garage. Get out of my cage. Get out of my life.
I understand Louie wants to put the situation back together. And he knows throwing him out would sever any possibility of that. At the same time, maybe I'm just putting myself too much into Louis De Palma's place here.
That just makes Louis seem all the more sad because he can't even allow himself that to just kick the guy out of the garage altogether. He loves his brother, and maybe there's still some hope there that this will resolve itself somehow. I don't know, but it is a shock, like I said, that Nick doesn't capitulate, that he basically says, all right, we're not brothers. That's really sad.
Are we moving on to the next scene? Are we going to Mario's?
Yes, but so I've learned a lesson from you, Father Malone.
Did you discover that much like the location of the Saturday Night Live after party, Mario's is on the move, baby? Here, it makes its appearance at the State Street Pub on the corner of State Street and Market, I think. Before it was in between, it had a green awning. It was in between, sandwiched in between some buildings. Another time it was on another corner diner. Oh my God, the Palace, I think it was called then. Mario's is the best kept secret in New York City. Only the most exclusive cab drivers can find it. Do they have beepers at this point? Are they getting beeped the secret location of Mario's every morning?
It's like a speakeasy where you have to, the little slot opens up and you got to give them the code word to get in.
HB, I know what it is. When Louie is handing out those envelopes, what were that? We thought that was for collecting money. They are, but in that envelope is the location for that day of Mario's.
I was watching this, and as I said, I've learned a lesson from you because every time they show B-roll of Mario's, as you've described it, it's as if Mario's is always in a different spot in the city. And not only was it at, as you said, the State Street Pub, but you had mentioned earlier in this podcast that some of the B-roll made it seem like a very balmy day in New York City, but yet this B-roll shot outside of the State Street Pub, aka Mario's, did you see the snowdrifts outside?
It's a full-on blizzard. I mean, this is B-roll, I'm guessing, from the blizzard of 78, which is obviously great footage, but it kind of makes the earlier footage seem a little wonky, not to mention the fact that who's taking cabs anywhere here? Everyone go home. It's Christmas.
It looked miserable out there. This shot of them driving up to this, this restaurant, this pub, there's snowdrifts like higher than the cars. It's insane. I assume there's somebody on the taxi team that's in charge of continuity, perhaps. And they were not on their game at all in this episode.
No.
We're talking about the location of Mario's, the fact that Elaine has a boy and a girl instead of two daughters. It's crazy. To be fair, every other episode that featured Mario's has a different exterior location. So what are you going to do? We're at the mysterious speakeasy known as Mario's. Louie is drinking alone, and Reiger goes in to see how Louie's doing, sensitive as he always is. Louie asks about the Christmas party, how things are going at the garage, because Elaine had this plan, you remember. And Alex confirms that Nick is still there and he's still cleaning up at the poker table. Louie's complaining to Alex how much he hates the holidays. This is a bigger deal for Louie than just dealing with his family issues. And here's where we get an interesting character reveal. I never picked up on this until watching this particular instance.
Oh, yeah.
So Louis says that he had to play the elf in the Christmas pageant every year until he went into the Army. I didn't know that he was in the Army. Did you?
Oh, I certainly didn't, but interesting. Tiny Louis De Palma in the Army in 1958, 59.
We established that he is 38 years old based on his high school reunion, right?
Yeah.
So 38. So he was born in what, 1940?
Yeah.
18 years old. He went into the Army.
He went into the Army in 1958, correct. Yes, he's too young for the actual action in South Vietnam, although he could have been over there as an advisor, I suppose. And it's too late for the Korean War. As what I think is he probably got shipped over to like Germany or one of maybe Japan for part of his duty and then spent the rest of it homeward doing nothing. Fixing cars, maybe.
He could have been in the motor pool, maybe a driver. My impression, I mean, if I'm writing fan fiction on Louis De Palma, I'm thinking he probably just got stationed in like Bayonne, New Jersey at some awful desk job, or maybe he was scraping barnacles off of ships in the harbor or something. Like, as you said, he arrived at the wrong time to be involved in either Vietnam or Korea. I couldn't imagine diminutive Louis De Palma in the Army with his attitude, but there you go. It was pretty remarkable.
I can imagine him in the Army and taking the orders. I just can't see him on the battlefield.
Charging a hill with a gun that is almost as big as he is, not a good image. I don't know.
You want to be in a foxhole with Louis De Palma. He wouldn't be able to get out of it with you. Oh, by the way, speaking of stupid one-liners, when Alex walks in, he's wearing a turtleneck and a pea coat and a scally cap. And he looked like he was on his way to an age swap production of Bugsy Malone. I think he'd played Knuckles. That's not just because of the Jewish thing. I think Reiger could really shine in that role.
So as they're sitting there commiserating, who comes in?
The devil himself arrives. Burns. Burns walks up and he pulls a reverse banta. He takes a chair that is turned around and turns it right side and then sits down like a normal person.
Oh, interesting. So Burns meets them there. He says he's on his way to meet his in-laws for a party, as we just established. And this leaves me to believe that he doesn't really want to go to this party with his in-laws. He's doing everything he can not to go to the party with his in-laws. So now he's going to Mario's as a precursor to going to his in-laws. Momentarily, we will see him go to the garage under the pretext that he forgot a gift there to give to his wife or something. As we'll see, spoiler alert, he ends up spending the rest of the time at the garage. I don't think Burns especially likes his in-laws. I don't think he especially likes his wife, Dorothy Hamilcutt. I think his soul is just too black to feel emotions of love and compassion, perhaps.
I'll go you one further. The Christmas party at his in-laws' house is completely fabricated. It's all just his alibi. So he can continue to lurk around the corners and watch his plan come to fruition of breaking up a family and spoiling Christmas for all. You think when he's on the phone during that final competition, he's on the phone with Dorothy Hamilcutt? No, he's on his phone. He's on the phone with his demonic superiors.
So Burns meets them there, like I said, and he confirms to Alex and Louie that Nick is cleaning out everybody at poker at the party, including him. They've got no money left.
Has he paid Alex his money? Has Burns paid Alex the money he owes him yet? No, of course he hasn't. But he's here gambling on Christmas Eve. That's just a fuck you to Alex. That's all that is. That's like yeah, I know I owe you money. Doesn't matter. I just lost all mine to his brother.
I would love to go back and rewatch that scene just to see if there's even a glimmer of a reaction from Reiger when he says, yeah, he cleaned me out too. Because it's nothing to Burns. It's like, oh, well, what can you do? I get no money. But I'd love to see just a flicker of annoyance in Rieger's eyes. Like, what? You owe me 25 large, you jerk. And you're gambling? What, are you kidding? Now, Louis demands that Reiger, who is apparently the best poker player in the garage, Louis is so incensed by all of this that he demands that Reiger take on Nick at poker and give him a taste of his own medicine. And Louis says he'll even bankroll Alex in the game. He says that there's savings that he's amassed over a great period of time. Somehow Alex agrees to this.
No pressure there as an employee, right? I need you to beat my professional poker brother player in poker with the money I have saved my entire life. You can do that, right? And if you lose, there'll be no repercussions. Oh, I'm sure. By the way, reasons to save money: 1, trip to Florida; 2, new car; 3, revenge. Now, I've never saved up for the trip to Florida or a new car, but certainly revenge.
Well, not to mention the fact that this is what Nick does for a living. He lives in the gambling capital of America. He plays poker for a job, and he expects Reiger is the best poker player compared to Banta and Wheeler and Elaine. Are you kidding me? That's nothing. That's not even a comparison.
Reiger, you can beat all the dum-dums in the garage. You can beat my brother.
And as a sign of things to come, I will say that there is a future episode that deals with the repercussions of a serious gambling addiction that Reiger has. So I guess we can see this as a foreshadowing of that, but there's no drama in Reiger's decision. It's just, okay, I want you to beat my brother, the professional poker player, at his own game. Okay, whatever. Out of the goodness of his heart, he decides to do this. We cut to the garage and the party is in full swing. To your point, this grimy, dirty, smelly, slick garage looks very festive, all thanks to Elaine. She's done a wonderful job.
It has a tree in it. Hooray!
Merry Christmas. It's miserable here. They get there and Nick sees them come in, and Louie rushes over, and Nick's first words to him were, Louie, I knew you couldn't be mad at me forever. He wants to bury the hatchet and get past it. But no, not Louie. Louie's serious about this. Louie insists that Alex play Nick one-on-one in poker. Somehow this is a thing. They've got a game going on, and all of a sudden they can just decide, all right, let's end the game we were playing where all this money has changed hands. It's just going to be Alex versus Nick. Whatever.
Everyone currently in the game, doesn't matter if you have any stakes in there, get out.
To which Banta complains that he wants his shoes back because he's lost so much money, apparently, that he had to put up his shoes as collateral, and he lost them to Nick.
You get a look at those shoes?
No, are they nice?
They're army boots. Isn't that weird?
More foreshadowing, perhaps. Interesting. Burns comes back to the garage, as I said, under this pretext of retrieving a present that he left there, but we know why he's there. We've already talked about it.
That's right. Oversee his plan in action, to giggle and whisper to his dark lord. It's working, my lord. They're all gathered around. It's Christmas Eve. They should be celebrating the birth of their savior, and I have them here gambling. No matter who wins, they all lose.
Maybe his direct report is Angela. Maybe it's Angela on the other side of that phone.
Absolutely. That's right, Burnsy. Keep at them. What's Nardo doing? Tell her she looks ugly.
So Louie gives Alex $3,000 to play with. And all of a sudden, which is a lot of money in 1978.
Do-re-mi, baby.
It's a lot of money now. I mean, but that's a lot of money back then. And all of a sudden, much like any other occurrence in the garage that happens, the whole garage, including Burns, who's now giving a play-by-play to, we're supposed to believe it's his wife on the phone, but we know it's Angela, just getting the play-by-play. Everybody in the garage is wrapped with interest in this game. Even the kids' choir that we talked about earlier, they're there watching the game.
Oh, yeah. And you know what, HP? I started doing this, and we're just going to have to make it a segment. It won't be a per every episode segment, but when they come up segment. And this is the noted extra segment. And I'm going to try and name these people. The best extra in this episode of Taxi, I'm going to name him Lumberjack Appleman. Standing directly behind them, next to our orphan, I assume, choir boy, is this guy in this flannel, red and black checked flannel outfit, just chomping down on an apple. It looks like it's running down his chin. Jesus Christ. Way to get on camera there, Mr. Lumberjack Appleman.
I noticed that guy too, just because he is going to town on that apple. An apple is kind of it's not the right season for an apple anyway. It's December, right? Like, where's he
It's in his stocking. It looked delicious. Juicy, I'll tell you that. Maybe he got it in a package from his parents who live in Florida. I don't know. But you're right. He was going after that thing like it bought him jewelry.
That was very odd. I did notice that guy. I didn't note what he was wearing, but you can't miss him because it's this big, juicy apple that he is just working his way through. It's incredible. They sit down to play. Like I said, the whole garage is focused on this sort of contest of wills. It comes down to a final hand with both players going all in. Of course, it's going to come down to some dramatic finale between the two of them. Okay. Reiger can't cover the bet, and Louie goes to his cage to get more money. Now, this is where it gets a little scary for Reiger. It turns out this money wasn't Louie's life savings. He's been stealing the company receipts to bankroll Reiger playing this poker game. So shit just got really real for Reiger playing this game.
And for Louie De Palma.
Yeah, so now it's not just about Reiger winning the day for Louie and triumphing over Louie's brother. It's about embezzlement. It's about both of them having some serious consequences if they lose, because it's not, first of all, you could make the case that Reiger could just try to explain things to the boss, but we both know that Louie has the ear of the boss. Like, Louie wakes up with an excuse for how he's going to get out of whatever trouble he gets into during the day. So
he's going to let Reiger take the fall?
Oh, 100%. I'm sure he would let Reiger take the fall. We've seen him do stuff like that.
Everyone in that garage was witness. They would all say Louie is lying. Louie De Palma would lose his job. Reiger might also lose his job just collaterally, but Reiger would definitely get another job at another cab company.
Sure, I'm not suggesting that Louie would come away unscathed, but we know, because we've been privy to this whole encounter, that Alex is blameless. Alex is playing this game in good faith, that the money was attained by legal means, not that it was stolen from the company. That's ridiculous. Reiger starts freaking out, as you would expect. At this point, there's more than $4,350 in the pot, because they're going back and forth. Nick is, seeing his raise and raising his thing, and then Reiger's raising. So the pot is crazy, and the tension is palpable. Everybody's on the edge of their seat. Even Burns on the phone with Angela is just freaking out.
Like that Wheeler to show off his actorly skills here, and he denotes exactly what's in the pot. Like, he's just keeping a running tally. So like his memorizational skills are on display.
Well, to be fair, there's a lot going on, because it's not just about cash. At one point, Nick puts like a week or 2 weeks with his mother in Vegas, plus this, plus that, plus the other thing. There's a lot of hypothetical items in the pot that have to be recorded and kept track of, right?
Plus hugs and kisses.
Right. Now here's another interest. This was something that maybe it took me a rewind and rewatch to hear. Did I just hear that? And I did. At this point, there's $4,350 in the pot, and Nick can't cover the last raise. So Louie insists, now this is interesting, Louie insists that Nick take his mother to Vegas for 3 weeks. He says 3 weeks. Now here's where DeVito makes a rare dialogue mistake. And this mistake came out on the broadcast of this episode, which I think is really rare here. After saying 3 weeks, he then reconfirms the bet by saying 2 weeks before Nick has a chance to try and bargain him down to 2 weeks. Because the way it's supposed to work is Louie says 3 weeks. Nick says, all right, how about 2 weeks? But they don't get to that point. Mm-hmm. Louie says 3 weeks, and then he says, all right, just to confirm, 2 weeks before Nick even has a chance to try and bargain him down. Did you notice that, Father Malone?
No, I did not.
I thought that was really interesting that made it into the broadcast.
Also interesting is that part of the deal is that there's going to be $300 involved for taking his mom to a nice meal, not the Taco Palace, And there's a full $100 to take her to one of those fancy floor shows. In like 76, 77, if you wanted to go see Elvis Presley, do you know how much a ticket cost?
I have no idea. What, $30?
$15. Now
Whoa.
now listen, on the King's half, they kept the prices low because they wanted every show to be sold out. Can't figure anyone else is getting too much more than Elvis was getting. So I'm just saying he could probably take her to 2 shows.
Wow. And just for comparison's sake, Father Malone, how much, if you were going to go see, let's say, your average Cirque du Soleil show, decent seats, how much would that cost you in today's money?
Like $150.
Wow.
I'm guessing.
That's crazy. No, that's interesting. Part of the bargaining is it's not just that Nick has his mother stay with him, but it's all of the things around that, making sure she feels loved, that she gets to go to nice restaurants and go to nice shows and everything else.
There's an extra $100 to be a decent son for 2 weeks, you fucking prick.
Nick calls the bet, and now we have to see what they have. This is the final turn of the cards.
It's so interesting. It's so interesting how he wins, HP. The cards that he wins while Burns is looking over it. What is Alex's winning hand?
Actually, I give them credit in a way for not making it some, like, they could have very easily made it a dramatic win where Alex has a royal flush or something like that. But no, it's nothing. Alex had, so Nick has 2 pair, which is not that strong of a hand. Like for a professional of Nick's evident caliber, that's not much to be going all in on this final draw, on this final hand. So he has 2 pair, aces and jacks. Alex, however, turns over 3 sixes, a crap 3 of a kind hand, and yet he beats the professional poker player from Las Vegas.
It's all for you, Damien. It's all for you. The 3 sixes, the number of the beast. Burns's plan is working on the eve of Jesus's birth.
Oh my God, are you suggesting that that's the number of the beast was at Burns's behest?
And on that night, a new savior was born on the streets of New York City.
That hadn't even occurred to me, but that is smashing right there. 3 sixes, 666. That's incredible. Wow. I was caught up with the fact that it was a lame hand. Like, it's not something I would stay in that high for, but nevertheless, we proceed.
That's how evil works. It's it isn't big and flashy. It's
it's the mundane, right?
That's right.
Well, and ironically, once the hands are revealed and Nick is lost, Louie is exultant. And even the kids' choir breaks into Hallelujah, which I think is interesting. Is that all part of Burns's, that's the irony of Burns's triumph?
Absolutely. This chorus of young street urchin angels. Where have these kids have been spending the weeks bilking people for money. And now here they are praising their dark lord. So
there you go. So now Nick is going to take Louie's mother to Vegas, and hopefully everybody's a little bit better person for it. There's a small bumper at the end of this show. The bumper is the kids' choir's back. They're singing Silent Night, and we see the cabbies exchanging gifts.
Yeah.
And I think the presumption is these are gifts that Elaine has given them. Did you see what the cabbies got, Father Malone?
No, I didn't. I was too busy just mystified by Tony Danza's open mouth chewing of cookies. It was just so horrific. That's all I could focus on. I'm sorry. What were the gifts they received?
Reiger got a coffee mug that says Alex in what appears to be an old English font.
You should have immediately headed over to the vending machine.
That's right. Gotten coffee, poured it into the mug. Banta got a yellow T-shirt with black lettering that says Banta Wait.
Bantamweight. HP, I got to confess, this is now 2 yellow shirts I owe you. Sometime for your birthday or Hanukkah or something this year, maybe the next, you're going to get a yellow bantamweight shirt. And then on another holiday, you will receive the long gestating when the hand goes up, the mouth goes shut t-shirt I owe you.
The meatballs shirt. I love it. Interestingly, I couldn't make out what Wheeler got from Elaine, but I guess it's not important. Very self-satisfied Louie comes out of his cage with a small tin of cookies. And at first, he just gives all the cabbies one cookie. I think they wag their finger at him or something. And then he said, oh, it's the season. He leaves the tin there so they can all have their own cookies. And I think that leads to Tony's open mouth chewing of the cookies.
Good God, man. It's just vile.
It's
Thank
not
God.
good.
Thank God they cut away. Okay, now, when they do cut away, HB, can I just mention this?
Yeah.
Final shot in the show is a B-roll of the New York skyline, obviously in wintertime, covered in snow. The children's choir is still playing on the soundtrack, and a very simple Happy Holidays came up. And I gotta say, I actually got choked up watching that in a way that was more personal, just these stark images and the sound, than it would have been had they cut to everyone in the garage going, everyone at Taxi wants to wish you a happy holidays. I just thought it was a stark and at the same time familial way to end that episode.
I'm going to agree with you there. I think part of the starkness of it is the happy holidays is presented in the yellow Taxi font, what you see the credits at the beginning of the show. So there's no adornment. There's no, to your point, if it was in cursive lettering Happy Holidays with Christmas trees and ornaments and presents around, it would seem a little bit too much like an episode of Love Boat or something like that. This was a very simple greeting to the audience, if you will, in a very plain, simple Taxi way. Now, again, we've beat up on this episode a little bit, but I will say that the holiday stuff, it was clear to me that even despite all of these kind of continuity errors and things that came up and things that didn't really ring true, they really were into this Christmas spirit business at Taxi. And I think they made an effort to set this particular episode apart as a Christmas episode, even down to this Easter egg at the very, very end of the show, when we normally have the woman's voice say, "Night, Mr. Walters," and he goes, Now we have the same woman, instead of saying that, she says, "Merry Christmas, Mr. Walters." And he continues to say, Just thought that was kind of nice that they changed it up just for this episode.
They cared right to the last second of their episode. It's indicative of the care we see in every episode of every show, regardless of the quality. Sometimes the writing's going to be good, sometimes it's going to be bad, sometimes performance is the same thing. Nevertheless, it isn't for lack of effort and care.
Let's dig into this a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about yellow lights.
What does a yellow light mean?
I love yellow shirts, yellow lights.
As a reminder, we're dealing with a scale from 1 to 5 yellow lights. 1 is, I may never watch this episode again. It's totally inessential. 5 is, this is the quintessential perfect Taxi episode. And as I do every week, I'm going to ask you, Father Malone, what do you give a Full House for Christmas?
I want to give it a 2. Give it a 2. Oh, I don't know, though. That last shot really brought it home for me. Plus, there was so much Machiavellian stuff. You know what? I changed my mind. I'm going to go 3. I'll give it a 3 lights.
Really?
Yeah, honestly, that last shot did knock me out. It felt in a way that 99% of television special Christmas episodes don't feel. It did not feel disingenuous. It felt like and now we've told you our Christmas story, go have your own. That's what it felt like. So that gives it an extra light for me. 3 lights.
I like your reasoning, and I'm very close to being swayed by it, but I think I'm going to stick with my original choice, which was 2 yellow lights. I will say this, that it's been a long time since I watched this episode. As I said, it's pretty rare to be broadcast, and it's not an episode that comes to mind for me when I'm thinking of my usual favorite episodes, but it was much better than I remember it being, which doesn't mean that it's a tremendous episode. It's a solid episode. I loved Richard Farangi. I thought he did a great job as Louie's brother. DeVito is great as he always is. It doesn't even bear mentioning that DeVito, he hits it out of the park yet again. I think part of why I don't give it any higher than 2 is, in this case, I feel like Alex is really just a means to an end for Louie to have the revenge against his brother. That doesn't really, Alex doesn't have a lot of agency in this episode, nor do any of the other cabbies for that matter. But in Alex's case, it's especially important because he's the focus of that climactic battle between Nick and his brother.
Well, I would argue that as far as agency goes, the episode begins with Reiger detailing how he spends Christmas at a huge sit-down table for 80 people because it's the Woolworth's lunch counter. So I would say that maybe they've given Alex a new family for Christmas, even if what brings him to that family is good old-fashioned revenge.
Sure, and there's no mistaking how happy all the cabbies are with each other when they're exchanging Elaine's presents, and he gives Elaine a big kiss, and he seems so pleased with his Alex mug, even though, as I said, he doesn't have a lot to do. By the same token, I like the fact that rational, pragmatic Alex is unwittingly roped into embezzling the garage's money to support Louie's fanatical quest to beat his brother. That, to me, was kind of funny, too, and I thought that was clever. On a whole, this is a very somewhat average episode for me. It's fairly inessential, although you learn a few nice things about Louie. As we said at the beginning, this is much more interesting for what transpired off screen than on. So my final score is 2 yellow lights. So it's not far off. We're not worlds apart. I got to go with my gut on this.
I don't blame you, HP. I was going with a 2 as well. Emotion got the better of me.
No, you made some very good points, and I did find the final shots affecting, but at the same time, I wasn't able to articulate as well as you did about why it was affecting. And I think it was very well said. So thank you for that. That's going to wrap up this episode of Night, Mr. Walters. Thank you so much for listening. Father Malone, when you're not clocked into the garage, where can our intrepid listeners find you?
Couple of places to find me. Go to fathermalone.com or go to weirdingwaymedia.com. That's where all of my podcasts, all the podcasts I'm associated with, like Noise Junkies, that's a music podcast HP and I do with Mondo Heather's Heather Drain, or I do a half-hour radio drama called Dark Destinations, or I do a review show called Midnight Viewing, the Night Gallery podcast about Rod Serling's follow-up to the Twilight Zone Night Gallery.
And I'm going to give a great big ditto to everything that Father Malone just said. I am also on the Weirding Way Media platform, and you can hear me, as he said, on other shows like Noise Junkies. I would second his encouragement to go check out Dark Destinations, which I think it's my favorite of all of Father Malone's projects. And that's not just because I did some of the music for it and some other things. I think it's brilliant, and I think you should check it out. And I've also got a Bandcamp site up, and you can find the links in the description for this episode.
Everyone go to there. All listeners, go check out HP's music, because the music you'll hear on most of Weirding Way Media is provided by this man, and it's always decent, always good, always fun.
Thank you very much, Father Malone. And thank you all for listening. And if you enjoyed the show, please feel free to like the episode, subscribe, and give us a review. We would love to hear from some of you listeners. And yeah, so please feel free to add your feedback in any way you see fit, and we'd love to hear from you. So for myself, HP, and my co-host, Father Malone, thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Night, Mr. Walters.